And before I get started, like huge shout out to Tim, all of Seattle Indies, and really just everyone who makes up the Seattle game development community. The only reason I was able to become a game developer, I was able to ship my own title, is because I was able to start my career in this really supportive area where I received so much advice, recommendations, mentorship, and other types of support. So thank you for all being really awesome and supporting each other. All right. So this is a long presentation. If you have to get up and use the bathroom in the middle, I understand. I'm going to try to make the best use of this hour, but I have exactly 60 slides. And if you know how that works, we're going to go fast. So this is a retrospective of Potions: A Curious Tale. It's a game that I shipped in March of this year, and it has quite the interesting story to it. First, let's start off with who I am. Hi, my name is Renee Gittins. I am currently the studio head of Stumbling Cat. That's my own studio, and it's the one that I was the lead developer on Potions: A Curious Tale under. I'm also the alumni board chair of the IGDA because I like to stay involved with that amazing organization. My last role in the games industry was as the general manager of Phoenix Labs Vancouver, creators of Dauntless and Fae Farm. And prior to that, as Tim mentioned, I was the executive director of the International Game Developers Association, where their mission is to support and empower game developers in achieving fulfilling and sustainable careers. And that's something that I really was honored to be able to help with. And I've published some white papers, but I do a lot of things to try to support the game development community. These are some games that I have worked directly on in my employment. And these are some games where I have either consulted or mentored their teams. And I should actually update this because I've done a bunch more now recently. Um, but we are talking today about Potions: A Curious Tale, and the strange development, the curious development tale it has. So let's start from the beginning here. I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. I was relatively okay in basically every subject, and I didn't feel any particular passions, though I really liked video games. I didn't know that I could be a game developer. I didn't even really know I could be a computer scientist in a way that I would find interesting. So I went into engineering, traditional engineering, and I thought prosthetics were really cool, so I ended up going into biomechanical engineering and biotech. And the reason Potions got started is because nobody wants to hire a biomechanical engineer in the video game industry, which makes sense. I received a lot of information from other game developers when I was looking to start my career in the games industry. Only really learned I could be a game developer my senior year of college. And at that time, a little too late to change my major. I was told, of course, networking is super important. All of you who are here are networking. Good job. It helps have deep knowledge in a discipline, that's specialization. I'm terrible at that and I never have done it, but it can help. It definitely helps have knowledge across all disciplines because you have to talk with other people to make games successful. You need to be able to work with them and understanding where they're coming from, what they do is super important. We should always take advantage of opportunities. And that's probably one of the things that I managed to do best throughout my career so far. And it helps to build a portfolio of your work. And that's where I decided I really needed to start because you can get a lot of those skills and other knowledge while working on that. I didn't know what I wanted to do in game development. I had taught myself software development while I was in biotech with the goal to switch over to game development. So I could be, a gameplay engineer and another type of engineer. I generally have the ability to organize and help people tackle problems, so I could be a producer. And I thought I could maybe be a game designer or something else. Well, the problem was I never really tried to design a game before. I had done some things in like elementary school for classes, and I wanted to figure out what that was like, and figured it was a good opportunity to address something that I have been bothered with in games for a long time. And that is the concept that you are a hero and you get rewarded for just murderously slaughtering every single wildlife creature you see, or person, or bandit, or whatever it is. Well, sometimes you can say, yeah, those are bad guys. A lot of times it feels like you're just wrecking the local wildlife population. And I wanted to feel like the character was progressing and getting stronger, but if you used your wits and got to your goals more quickly because you were intelligent about it, that you should be rewarded for that, for your smarts. And that's where I came up with the idea of potions. So potions is at its core a resource management game. You don't level up. You discover ingredients, you discover recipes, some through experimentation, some through adventuring in the world, and then you use those potions as spells to battle monsters or solve puzzles or overcome other obstacles. It's also based on fairy tale and folklore from around the world, and it features a young witch main character who's sort of coming into her age, figuring out what life has in store for her. It's really a coming of age story. Now, this is just like a really rough breakdown of how this works. You gather ingredients, craft potions, you explore, get more ingredients. You can then use them to make potions and unlock rare ingredients with those potions. You can overcome enemies and blockers and puzzles. And then, you can progress the story, unlock new biomes, collect rare cards, fill out your bestiary, recipe book, item book, and fight dungeons and bosses and overcome all these really cool things that I've always loved in games. Well, here's the thing. If you ask any game developer what's the best advice for making your first game, they will tell you make it a small and manageable scope. Make sure you have a short development cycle. You're going to learn the most on that very first game you work on. Focus on one or two core mechanics, not a bunch of systems. Make sure that you have a small amount of content and assets that are used well, and don't write a novel, basically. Well, I did none of that. I made this game with a massive scope. I took 9.5 years to develop it. I have so many systems in this game, it's ridiculous. I have 8 biomes, over 100 potions, 30 different types of enemies, and I wrote 22,000 words of dialogue for it. And, it worked out, but not as I had planned. So with this giant game, I knew that it was going to take a while to develop. After talking with people about my idea, a lot of people were really interested. It's interesting to have combat, but combat not always being the answer. For there to be some advantages and some disadvantages for engaging in combat. I wanted to prove that potions was going to be of interest to people that are not just friends and peers I'm running into at conferences. And so I decided to run a Kickstarter. And this was in 2016. This was sort of past Kickstarter's heyday. And thankfully, it was ultimately successful. But I certainly learned a lot on the way. It is very difficult running a Kickstarter early in development. You basically have to pretend to make a game before you make a game. Would not recommend it, honestly. So that set me up with a little bit more leeway. Through the Kickstarter, I raised $64,500, which was way less after taxes. But that was enough to pay for art and audio, which I'm bad at, and not enough to pay me a single cent. So I had to figure out what I was going to do to live while developing this game. I initially started taking on contracts. For indie studios, I did server development, technical production. I was even a freelance games journalist, and I tried to take on roles where I was actually learning in them in ways that would benefit my indie game. For example, I became the Xbox marketing coordinator for Games of Gold because I wanted to know how publishers looked at indie games. So I got to be the person who looked at indie games for publishers, and that really helped me there. Unfortunately, I found that ultimately it was really stressful managing contracts. I am still owed thousands of dollars by some people I was previously contracted for, and it was actually less stress and overhead to work full-time in a steady job than to work part-time in contract jobs. So that's what I swapped over to. I felt that technical production worked really well for me. I love helping engineers, and I can kind of speak their language. And I didn't have to code all day and then go home and code all day. So that was something that worked out well for me. I was also a solutions architect. And then beyond that point, I ended up getting into executive management, first as the executive director of the International Game Developers Association, and then as the general manager of Phoenix Labs. And with those funds, as I mentioned, I had to build my team. And so these are just some of the learnings I had throughout that process. One of the biggest downfalls I saw for other people, and a little bit for myself, is bringing on team members before you are prepared for them. There is nothing that is more demoralizing for someone to come onto a project than to feel useless. And that means you need to understand what you want them to do and how you want them to do it and be able to set them up for success from day one. So it helps to have a vision of your project, to have proven that out. Like if you rough prototype it, even if it's a paper prototype, that's going to help you understand what you're going to be asking people to do when they come to assist you. You need to know what you're going to have them do, and you need to know how you're going to compensate them. I was lucky, right? I had an engineering job before I started this whole process. So I decided to compensate everybody upfront. Between money out of my own pocket and the Kickstarter, that's how I was able to fund my game. That's not the opportunity that everyone has. So it's something that you'll have to figure out. There's a lot of options, profit sharing, etc. The nice thing about paying people up front, though, is that you know that you're not putting them in financial stress. How do you find people? Well, this is a wonderful group to find people in, actually. I found a number of the people on my team through Seattle Indies and the local community, but I also found them through recommendations from friends and associates. I've ran into people at conferences, and I even found people on internet forums. My really, really wonderful environment and UI artist I found because I made a post on the Unity forum that I need an artist, and he applied. So there's definitely a lot of places to look around, and you have to sort of understand what you want in a teammate, especially when a bunch of people want to be game developers. Almost everyone that came to work on my team did not have much, if any, professional game development experience, and so we were all sort of learning the ropes together. But throughout my career, even as I became a hiring manager for other studios, I found that these are pretty much the core tenets that I look for when hiring someone. The first thing I always look for is that they are eager to learn and willing to teach themselves. Some people call this being a self-starter. I know that that's not always the most beloved term, but I do think it is suitable. You can, of course, have somebody who's really, really experienced, but if they're a complete stick in the mud and don't want to learn a new engine or think that their way of managing something is the only way to do it, they can be very difficult to work with. I'd rather have someone who's willing to be more flexible. With that in mind, it also helps if someone can both accept and provide criticism in a constructive manner. We, as game developers, have to iterate on things a ton because you don't know what fun is when you write it down on paper. And so a lot of our work is understanding what's wrong with our work. And so it really helps to have teammates where you can communicate with, what you think might be wrong. Of course, try to do it respectfully, but if someone can't take that, if it's too emotionally difficult for them to handle, it's going to be very hard to have them function well on a team that is going to be rapidly iterating towards the project. Helps have people compatible with the team. I can get along with a lot of people, and I have definitely made wrong hires for my team, assuming that everyone else can get along with people who can rub others the wrong way. And unfortunately, it caused like blowups in my team because they were just butting heads with others, and it was really hard to get them to work together. And then finally, yes, look for someone who's competent and experienced and things like that. But I really do feel when I'm hiring, that's the least important quality because if they have all those other qualities, they'll be competent so quickly. You're just setting them up for growth. Then as you're managing these folks, just these are my like quick management tenets. Make sure you're giving people well-defined goals and communicating them and recording them in places where they can refer to. Give them honest feedback and make sure that you are also acknowledging their efforts. This is when I have messed up on. I can be very engineer focused, so I tell them all the things that they need to work on and forget to tell them all the things they did great at. We are egotistic creatures, we like to get approval. Like that's actually a core to functioning well in society. And it helps to keep that in mind. And it doesn't hurt to give someone a compliment or at least acknowledgement of their efforts. I try to make sure that people can be heard and give feedback. It really helps to empower people to stand up and say when they think something's going wrong because it helps you identify potential issues before they become big issues. And then it helps to still have an established decision structure, right? As much as I tried to get feedback from my team members, ultimately I decided that this was not going to be a democratic game. It was my game. I was still going to be the final decision maker. And everyone understood that. So if I did decide to make the final decision, no one felt hurt because they came into it with that expectation. And finally, don't be a jerk. It's a lot harder than it sounds, but it's something we can all work towards. All right, so let's go the exact opposite direction from soft skills to systems architecture. So Potions: A Curious Tale is a Unity game. So it's developed in C Sharp. Actually started in Unity like 4. Most of my development in Unity 5.6, and now it is in Unity 2022. My architecture approach was mostly to try to keep the systems from interfering with each other. With a really complex game where you have crafting systems, inventory systems, monster systems, loot systems, equipment systems, it helped to make sure that those systems were working as independently as possible because I redid my crafting system 3 times. And if that had been really integrated with other systems, that would have been an absolute nightmare. But the way it was implemented, I could just pretty much completely change how that system worked without affecting any of the rest of my code. I leaned heavily into singletons, probably too heavily into singletons, but it was a really convenient way to manage data, particularly across scenes in Unity. And I had core systems for inventory, dialogue, all those fun systems where you need to be calling into them quite frequently. For all other types of systems, enemy AI, how potions and effects worked, how levels worked, how engagements and puzzles and interactions with environment work. I tried to be as modular as possible. This was a really, really big game. The last thing I wanted to do was script everything individually. It would have taken so much time. The way that I have things set up is like I have a base monster behavior, for example, and then I can throw on its control behavior. I can throw on its like aggressive movement behavior. I can throw on whether it uses spell attacks, or I could just keep throwing on more spell attacks on there. I could put 20 spell attacks on one creature, and it would just be with a global cooldown, spamming fireballs and lightning bolts and whatever else I put onto it. That means I could create an entire new creature with a new set of abilities in about a minute. And that is really helpful for making a lot of content and for testing content to see what feels good and what doesn't. And then lastly, I made sure that my data was editable and readable, particularly dialogue, any text like that. I leaned heavily, heavily into CSVs because I could keep them all on Google Sheets, edit them anywhere in the world, and share them with anyone in the world, and then download them and drop them right into the game, and everything would just magically work. My general approach was to start with a single solution for what I was working with and then genericize it. You don't want to fall into a trap of trying to write perfect code the first time. You will never do it, and you will waste a lot of time doing it. I used a lot of prefabs, obviously with a content-heavy game. It helps to make sure that that content is as reusable as possible. And then I used a lot of generic scripts for cutscenes and in-world events. So I would have, Potions is sort of an RPG of sorts. A lot of dialogue and in-world events happen where NPCs are walking around and engaging with each other and throwing things. And so I had scripts to control characters walking around, scripts to control them throwing things, scripts to control spells and disappearing and things like that. So these could play out all in the world and make you feel more immersed in the game. And it made it a lot lower barrier of entry to put these scenes in the game, which made me add them in when they made sense, instead of being hesitant to do that. I don't want to have a high barrier of entry to make the game more interesting, have more story. Here's some things I messed up on. Tricky considerations. I thought because I could control my character in the world and throw potions that I had almost controller implementation almost done. Oh no, not at all. UI is the worst thing to implement on controller if you've only done like mouse inputs on UI because You need to know what window you're on. And when you have a crafting heavy game where you have sub windows of items and craft scenes and selection like that, oh, it is an absolute nightmare to create focus management. So do that from the start. That would be my recommendation. I would have saved a lot of brutal time right at the end of development trying to get in controller support. One of the other issues I ran into was localization, particularly with rebinding and device swaps. Potions of Curious Tale automatically swaps devices, so if you are playing on your keyboard and mouse and decide that you prefer to pick up your Xbox controller, as soon as you pick up your Xbox controller and nudge it, it'll swap over to the Xbox controller, refresh all the UI, immediately show you the buttons that you need to look for. But the way that you have to put those systems is like I hard coded the key inputs that you need to do and then had different dialogue depending on whether it was controller or keyboard and mouse. But as soon as you allow for rebinding, you have to be able to swap out what those symbols are. And then if you're also localizing that, you need to make sure you're doing that across languages. It's just a huge nightmare. So you have to make sure that you know that your dialogue is referencing actions, which are referencing bindings, which are then referencing localizations for that binding, going all the way back up that chain. And then finally, I had to last minute create a save recovery because of a very interesting Steam setting. No one will likely run into this, but here's a warning. If you have a Steam game with a demo game and decide to use the same save location, so demo files can be loaded into your main game, if you've disabled the main game's cloud saves, but point the demo towards the main game, if you haven't explicitly disabled the demo saves, it'll save the demo saves to the cloud. And then if you enable the main game saves, it will bash over everyone's actual main game saves with the demo saves. And that is how I deleted like 1,400 players' saves in one checkbox. Luckily, I had login enabled for everything, so we were able to create a crawler that went through the players' logs and rebuilt their saves. You never ever want to be in that situation, but I am so thankful that there was something that I could do because I have never felt my stomach drop out of my chest as hard as I did when I realized that I had deleted everyone's saves. All right, playtesting. I think that people who are new to game development do not understand how valuable playtesting is. Playtesting is where you get the best information about how to make your game better and if your game is, honestly, even worth developing. Game development is absolutely iterative. You're never going to start with a perfect game. And you might not even start with anywhere close to the game that you end up with because it's going to take a lot of changes to find the fun and keep the fun and add additions to that fun. I know that some people like using forums for playtests. That probably gets you about 15% of the data that you can get from a playtester. Just seeing when someone cracks a smile at your game or furrows their brow in frustration is going to be worth so much more than any form. Because oftentimes they don't even remember that they've done that. But if you're watching them in real time, taking notes, and trying not to scare them off by obsessively taking notes while they're playing, you're gonna get so much information. And it's a really, really wonderful way to just like superpower your game, get it really polished and understand what's fun and what to really tune. And as a game developer, the longer that you work on your game, the more you realize that you don't understand your game like anyone else, because you're gonna be way too close to that thing. But it is important to remember that you can't make everyone happy. You need to have a target audience. And it is okay that if people outside of that target audience don't love your game. One of my favorite playtesters hated my game. He was one of my really good friends from college who was a pro StarCraft 2 player. Pro StarCraft 2 players don't like cozy games. Separate combat's not always the answer, it turns out. He really hated the dialogue, he hated the crafting systems, he didn't like the combat either. I certainly did get some good feedback from him, but I would be making a different game if I was trying to make a game that he liked. So it's okay that he didn't like it. For my audience, I had assumed that this was sort of a Zelda-like game, and so that people who liked it would be young gamers, who tend to be Zelda fans, and old school gamers who also tend to be Zelda fans. That is somewhat the case, but I forgot that I was making a game about a girl and fairy tales. Turns out that girls are actually my main audience, and they performed really strongly. When I played the game at PAX for the first time, I had people come by and express some interest. When I showed the game at Geek Girl Con for the first time, my booth got mobbed. Like I had little girl, like I had a swarm of children in front of the booth. I had girls coming up who were already dressed as witches and pointing at the screen, going, "Mom, look, it's me!" Like that's who I'm making the game for, and I can't believe I didn't realize until I started playtesting, until I brought it out and put it in front of my clearly core audience. Of course, hindsight's 2020, but that was definitely a revolution for me. I use sort of this feedback to make user personas. This can really help you understand which qualities of your game you should ramp up. Understanding that like min-max collectors and crafters are a big part of the persona who play my game is important because I'm not a min-max collector crafter. So understanding what makes them tick, understanding what systems I can put in that make them feel better about that collection and crafting was really important for making sure that the game was successful. One of the things that I had mentioned before is that I had refactored my crafting system multiple times. The reason that I had to do that refactor was not because of code reasons, it's because it wasn't fun. I was trying to encourage people to experiment with crafting, and there were just way too many opportunities to fail at that experimentation. I thought that people would be curious and keep experimenting even if they ran into a failure. But as I watched playtesters, the first time they failed, they immediately stopped experimenting. They wouldn't craft any more potions through experimentation from that point on. So I changed the crafting system first to make it really hard to fail, and then I changed it again to make it impossible to fail with entry-level ingredients. Like if you have one mana ingredients, you can just throw them in there. You will just only make potions. It's just success after success. And that feels good to the player. So then when they ramp up and get more advanced level ingredients and they fail here and there, they at least understand there's some logic behind it. They don't feel like the system's broken or it's too hard to understand. They have a bunch of confidence because they've had so many successes so far. One of the main approaches I take to game design overall, and another one that is very helpful to look for in playtesting, is designing for player emotion. I know that there's a lot of different approaches to game design, but the one that clicks most for me is thinking about any interaction or event in a game and how I want people to feel about it. Do I want them to be surprised or feel success or feel disappointment or feel frightened? And then thinking about how to really like tune into those emotions. Like think of a first person shooter. If you got a headshot and the other person just like fell over and you got like +1 kill and that was it, it wouldn't feel very satisfying. But if you got headshot, like extra camera zoom craziness, like that feels like, yeah, I got a headshot, right? Like it's a good way to celebrate the player's success. Here's one of the examples in the game. Mushrooms. Mushrooms are one of the first mobs that we ever created. They look exactly like collectible mushrooms. And in fact, the player is introduced to a lot of collectible mushrooms before one jumps out of the ground and tries to eat their face. So this is extremely surprising. But since it's one of the first creatures, aggressive creatures that players encounter, I didn't want to feel like it was a horror game, right? Like this is still sort of a cozy adventure game. I used that, the desire to surprise the player but not completely terrify them, to change the designs. Originally, it would pop out of the ground and just immediately charge at the player. Way too scary. So instead, they pop out of the ground, which is very surprising, sort of pat for a second and then chase the player. And just that brief pause of about a quarter second makes them way less terrifying. The SFX, the sound effect for these popping out of the ground is like a cork popping. It's like, which is not a scary sound. It's a startling sound. Cork popping is a startling sound, but it's not terrifying. They move just a smidge slower than the player can walk. This is before the player gets their sprint. So it feels intimidating, but not like overwhelming. You sort of run away from it as it's like making little mushroom noises at you. And just overall, like look at its animation. It's like all bouncy and bubbly, and you feel a little bad when it like dies and the mushroom top pops off. I would say that the most difficult part of potions was getting the tutorial correct, and that's going to be the same thing for anyone. I've heard the recommendation that you should build your tutorial last. If you're not familiar with the term up here, fatui, first time user experience. You're going to hear fatui a lot in some studios because fatui is very important. So if you have bad fatui, then no one's going to keep playing your game. Fatui is how players experience your game and consider your game and decide whether they're going to purchase your game or refund your game. And so I wanted to make sure I had good fatui. So I throw the players into a boss battle like in the first 30 seconds of the game, which is what all cozy games do. And I throw them into a boss battle without any weapons, where they can't actually attack the boss. And that is a lot for players to overcome, right? They're put into a situation where they're used to being very empowered. They're a weapon rex. You can't pick up weapons. You're a young girl, and they are very heavy. Instead, you learn through this experience that you have to be strategic. You can actually get the boss to attack the weapon racks, and that actually is what hurts it. You're using the environment to your advantage. And it sets up sort of like the whole tone of the game. It's not about just burning something down or destroying it. It's about being strategic and using the tools and opportunities you have to get the best out of the situation. And because it was such an unexpected approach, I required a lot of iterations to ensure that players were understanding what was going on. This fight had particles added, camera zooms added, additional dialogue added. I wanted to make sure that the player felt like they were discovering this on their own, not that Navi was popping up and saying, "Hey, Luna, you need to make sure that the Kraken attacks the weapon rack so you can defeat it," because that really takes away player agency. They don't feel like they've discovered anything. But it's still hard for them to learn. So building in those hints and testing them and seeing how people reacted was so important for getting this initial fatui to feel good. And then like the final best thing to look for in playtesting is where you can add juice. Juice is how you enhance your game. Juice is providing additional feedback through animations and sound effects, through UI pop-ups, through types of responsiveness. It is making your game feel more interactive. And that's where you can really look for, again, player emotion. What emotions are you trying to invoke? How can you use particle effects and sounds and animations and other things to really bring that forward? Because that's going to make your game feel fun, engaging, more than just a series of interactions that a player is going through for points. All right. So I didn't have a lot of money for marketing, so I decided to not spend money on marketing. I took approach what I call guerrilla marketing. I figured out who my audience was and where they consumed their content, and then I made a lot of content where they consumed content. I don't write a lot for my game development. I don't believe in GDDs. I could give a separate talk on what I mean by that. But I do believe in a marketing plan because it is to hold your feet to the fire, honestly, because most of us game developers are not marketers and don't enjoy it that much, but it is something that is as important for the success of your game as making the game fun. So I had a overall marketing timeline. I recommend that you have minimum 3 months before launch, ideally 6. I had a launch day checklist. I had a weekly checklist of what I was trying to do every day. I had all sorts of release date considerations, showcases to apply to, potential partners to outreach to. I had similar titles to see what they were doing in marketing and what worked for them. And I also looked up who was streaming what, who had similar cozy game coverage, etc. And I had so many lists of everyone that I could reach out to, both in game communities and not. I looked up mommy bloggers because I thought this could be one of those like educational-ish games that would be something that parents would want to see their kids playing. I looked up local news outlets, game news outlets, and influencers. Some of my favorite resources for all this types of research: How to Market a Game. Chris Rukowski is amazing. His free Steam class is amazing, completely free. Recommend taking it if you're ever releasing a game on Steam. His newsletter is great, and his Discord community is lovely because you can just post your Steam description, information, trailer, whatever is on there, and get a bunch of feedback immediately from other game developers who have also been studying marketing a lot. I enjoy the Game Discover Co. newsletter and the How to Market Game newsletter. Steam DB is really important if you're launching on Steam to understand how you're doing with wish lists and trending compared to other titles coming out your week, as well as like what are ideal days to launch on. Sully Gnome is a very interesting website where you can look up streamers by other games that they have streamed. So you can find the closest comparable game to yours that has been successful, and then stalk every streamer that has played it, and then reach out to all of them and say, hey, I saw that you played Little Witch in the Woods. I think you would like my game, Potion's Curious Tale. You should check it out. And indie peers. I mean, honestly, some of the best resources you have right now are the other people in this room, because we're all going through this experience. So bug each other, ask them what worked, what didn't. And for me, having other indie game developers promote my game meant that it went to other indie game fans. You know, they are influencers of their own. So this is a good example of what all this effort did for me. You can see there's a little bump before the actual demo launch. That is when I started promoting that the demo was about to come out. The demo launch itself really bumped my wishlist actions. The little sort of like smaller bumps in the middle there, that's actually Steam Next Fest, I think. Yeah, it's actually not Steam Next Fest. That's just December. I don't know what happened there. I released a new trailer, really, really hyped it up. And then I had been posting on TikTok every freaking day. I do not like TikTok. I do not like using TikTok. I don't like consuming TikTok. But there's a lot of young women on TikTok, and those are my audience members. So I will absolutely post on TikTok as much as possible. And I managed to get a viral TikTok. I said, I've been working on the same game for 9 years. I hope you'll check it out. This is what it's about, etc. And then I said that 12 different ways, and one of them went viral. So that's what marketing is. It's yelling into a void, and occasionally the void's like, this is good for algorithms, and then throws it up. It's depressing. I don't think marketing is fun when you're doing it this way, but it's pretty much the only way to be effective. You're not going to put out 2 Reddit posts and get a successful game. You're gonna have to really, really work for it. You need to give yourself the time for it. You can't be like crunching on bugs and also trying to market at the same time. You will, because you're gonna still have bugs, but just plan for that marketing. I turned that viral TikTok into local news coverage because you take advantages when you have them. And then that final spike up is right before lunch. So we'll be coming back to this slide a little later. I posted on everything. I got my fiance to post for me because it's great when a third-party person is talking about you and your success, even if you tell them what to write and give them the picture. I made a live action trailer with help of a friend. I was posting memes. That was more for me, honestly, but like I posted so much on everything I could, and if anything got even like mild traction, I would post a lot more on that platform. You should absolutely feel embarrassed by marketing. Like you should be like, I'm a complete sellout and I'm bothering everyone with my game. If you don't feel that, you're not marketing enough. Like you should dread how much you're marketing. And I actually have reasons why and reasons you should look for marketing. So Steam helps your game a lot, but it helps it only at very specific points in time if you're doing the correct things. So when you initially launch your Steam page, Steam gives you a huge algorithm boost. So don't launch your Steam page with temp assets and short paragraphs and everything else. You are missing out on a bunch of potential promotion. Make sure you launch a nice Steam page at first. I did not do that. As of this summer, Steam allows you to launch a demo page separately and get review scores for that demo. So absolutely pretend that that's like a mini launch. Take advantage of it. Steam Next Fest is something that you can participate in only if you have a demo and a non-released game. Again, you can at least get hundreds of wish lists from that. And then if you are able to get into popular upcoming, that's about having about 7,000 to 10,000 wish lists 2 weeks before 2 weeks on your launch. That also will like feed into getting more wish lists. You get on that list, like the next 1,000 games coming out that's popular, it's date ranked, gets you a lot of coverage. Then on your game launch or your early access launch, you get a bunch of promotion. And if you have gotten enough sales and at least 10 reviews, they don't have to be positive reviews, you can land on new and trending. And that is the front page of Steam. And if you plan it right, you can be on there for 2 or 3 days. Every single day you're on the front page of Steam is over 1 million impressions. That's thousands of wish lists and hundreds to thousands of sales. As an indie, that can completely change whether your game is profitable or not. So aiming to get those 7,000 wish lists, bugging the crap out of your friends to leave a review in the first day. Super, super, super important. Then you can get bumps from Steam sales and other Steam events. And then there's this magic number around $100,000 in sales where Steam decides you actually have a real game and that they will promote it more. It's just like this magic point where they're like, I think this isn't a scam, that people like it. And then they'll just like throw it out to more people. So aiming for that definitely helps. I even made a showcase about witchy games so I could put my game in it. Like I was doing everything possible. I'm like, man, there's no showcases around the launch of my game. I guess I'll just make one. You can do that. Like you're allowed to. So I made Witchy Wonder Women, which was focused around Women's History Month and witch-themed games. And some of you might know that my launch was not what I thought it was going to be. I had what would be called a Black Swan event. I launched my game on International Women's Day. It was actually 10 a.m. March 7th. So it was International Women's Day in Japan, but not here yet. And a couple hours later, EA launched 11 titles from their back catalog on Steam. So that new and trending page that I had been aiming for, I came in with 25,000 wish lists. I was absolutely set up for that new and trending page. And I immediately got bumped off because a couple hours later, all of these games came out. More than would ever be normally released on a single day on new and trending. And it sucked. My sales were 30% of what I predicted that first day. And I was conservative with my predictions. Well, I believe in turning lemons into lemonade. So I went to social media because people hate EA, unfortunately. I don't hate EA. It was a very unfortunate event, but some people did not like that. So I made some Reddit posts, some Twitter posts, and one TikTok post. And I was really upset. I cried in this TikTok. And then I went to bed. And the next day, I had 9 million views on TikTok. So let me talk a little bit about what this turned into. News coverage. Lots and lots of news coverage because Games Press found that a lot of people were looking at this. I had people telling me that their wives who didn't play video games saw my TikTok on their TikTok. As of now, I think that TikTok has 16 million views. Yeah. So it was the best marketing I could have ever done. Thank you, EA. I appreciate you. To further explain, remember this is the graph I showed you before. And this is my game pre-launch, and that's the going up to launch section right there. This is my game post-launch. I recognize these graphs are hard to compare, so let me overlay the previous graph on this one. That little bump was my launch. That big bump, that's the TikTok. So yeah, it had an impact. You know that you're marketing well when people start making posts about how they want to stop talking about your game. This is on r/girl gamers, which I find to be one of the most supportive communities for my game for girl gamers. And they made a post being like, can we please stop talking about this game? Which was funny because they were absolutely called out for talking about the game. Now, I'm joking a lot about this. This actually was a really traumatic event because it wasn't 18,000 people saying that, 16 million people saying that I was really cool. I had mentioned International Women's Day in that TikTok, and there was some people who really did not like that. I had said in the TikTok, you know what sucks about being a game developer? That you can work for almost 10 years on a project, and then EA can come out of nowhere and release 11 games and ruin all of your marketing, all of your hard work and effort to set it up for success. So happy International Women's Day. Thanks. Well, that got on 4chan and other places too. So while I received so much wonderful support, I received death threats. I had people spamming graphic porn in my Discord server. I had people attempting to review bomb the game. I learned that keys without the E means kill yourself. I got hundreds of hate mails and over 10,000 hateful comments. And TikTok was like, man, these angry people are engaging a lot with this content. Let's find more of them. I still have what I like to call hate stalkers. I can't post anything without a bunch of these people being like, you suck and your game's bad. But they helped make my game successful. Now, if you've ever launched a game, you know that launch week is a bunch of hot fixes and patching. Man, nothing's worse than hot fixes and patching and death threats and community management all bundled in one. I was having panic attacks. I have anxiety, but I don't tend to get panic attacks. I was barely sleeping. I was getting back-to-back panic attacks. It was really, really difficult. It was a huge emotional drain. So if you happen to be in a Black Swan event, these are some things that can help. I had hired a PR company, and they're amazing to work with. I really appreciate them. Nothing made me appreciate them more than having someone to rely on when every press wanted to talk to me, and people were also spamming me with hate. They helped me keep sanity and manage communications that I really wasn't prepared to manage in that moment. I wish I had a non-dev community manager. It would be great if I had someone who was not attached to this game, being able to sift through the comments to find which ones were actually, bugs about the game I needed to fix, and which ones were telling me that I'm an emotionally manipulative. We'll just bleep out the rest. I uninstalled every single social media application on my phone because notifications give me anxiety now. And I now still, over 6 months later, only engage with social media, particularly TikTok, when I am completely emotionally prepared for it. So I'm almost undoubtedly going to see hate, even if I haven't posted in weeks. I didn't argue with any of them because you don't want to feed the trolls. Definitely don't engage with them directly. You're just going to be rolling with pigs in the mud. That doesn't look good. That doesn't help anything. It doesn't even make you feel better. And ultimately, I've been prioritizing my mental health. Yes, I could have been marketing my game more over the last 6 months. What would that cost be? What would the benefit be? I don't think a couple $1,000s are worth taking years off my life from the stress of engaging when I'm not prepared. I leaned on my friends and loved ones, and I try to always be honest about how I'm feeling. So I would let people know, I'm not feeling good, I'm feeling really anxious, I'm feeling depressed, I feel like everyone hates me. And when I let people know how I was feeling, they let me know when I was wrong, that I was loved and appreciated, and there was also 10,000 positive comments. Just really easy to focus on those negative ones. I try to keep a list of my wins, and this is something I've done since I've been the executive director of the IGDA. Public positions are really stressful. I have a document that's called Good Feels, and anytime someone writes a really sweet message to me, I copy it and I put it in my Good Feels doc with like the date. And whenever I'm feeling really bad, I go through and I rack up all my good feels and recover a bit. And I remember that even if some people are mad at me on the internet, there's a lot of people who I've helped and uplifted and affected in a positive way. So, what am I doing now? Console ports. Oh boy, so many console ports. Like, I would show you pictures, but I can't. It's kind of nice. You get to deal with like a bunch of bureaucracy that's not really your problem, but it is. And a bunch of APIs that are absolutely your problem to deal with. It's been fun so far, and I'm sure I will have more advice for that later, aside from hand focus management on controllers, I tell you. I'm working on merchandise. I am working on an art book, and I suck at graphic design, but it's really fun. So I'm like 77 out of 97 pages complete, which I'm going to try to finish next week for first draft. And I'm working on a plushie. Not because it's financially beneficial to make a plushie, but because I want a plushie for this. And I need to order 500 of them. So I'm going to really try to get pre-sales on this plushie, because look at how cute he is. That's your cat companion. And I'm trying to do more to continue uplifting other game developers. I started a little series called Pixels and Dreams, targeted potions audience, basically young girls who are interested in game development, because a lot of the resources and materials out there are not targeted at them. You know, there's wonderful nonprofit programs that uplift girls in game development, but they're not putting out tons of YouTube videos or things that people can relate to. So I'm trying to do that. And I'm trying to do stuff for game developers. I recognize that crafting system architecture is not something that a lot of like Unity tutorials cover or anything like that. So I've been trying to create things like that. And then I'm engaging with all sorts of other amazing programs. Seattle Indies, IGDA, AIAS, and I even mentor for IGDX, which is the Indonesian Game Developer Exchange. A wonderful program that uplifts indie developers in Indonesia to empower them and invigorate their economy. Yay! Thank you. I guess I have like 7 minutes. I don't think I get done in time, honestly. Does anyone have any questions that they want? Okay, we're just gonna go in order. In the back, please.
Yeah, how did you find out about the Steam algorithm items? Because I know that some applications disclose those things, some don't, some change constantly, but they're critical no matter what it is, whether it's Steam or YouTube or TikTok or whatever, to know what those algorithms are.
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. So the question was, how did I know about the Steam algorithms? Let me preface that. Nobody actually knows about the Steam algorithms, but a lot of people have a lot of data. So Steam is willing to talk a bit about it. They have some talks online where you can listen to them, but it's mostly through How to Market a Game and Game Discover Co. They both put out a ton of articles, a ton of studies, and collect a ton of data from all sorts of game developers to see what has worked for them. So I've read a lot of articles, and that's where I've gotten most of that information. And yeah, it's always changing, but Steam's actually been pretty good about telling people when it's going to change.
Hi, I'm actually Indonesian, so I was wondering, like, well, why, like, you wanted to work with developers in the country? Like, that's just so interesting to me because I don't really hear about Indonesia at all, like in mainstream or like anything, like even in gaming. So like, I don't know, that just like took me by surprise. I really love it, but I'm just curious, like, why you pick up the
Yeah, absolutely. The question is why I am engaging with the Indonesian Game Developer Exchange, because they're not considered one of like the main game development hubs. Honestly, it's because one of my friends was a mentor for them 4 or 5 years ago, recommended me for the program. I thought they were doing some really cool work, and now I think this is my 4th year of mentoring Indonesian game developers. They run this program every year. So just happened to be reached out to at the right time, I guess. I love mentorship programs, accelerators, things like that. So I'm engaging in one in Ohio at Shawnee State here in a month as well. In the center here.
Yeah, you talked about kind of the scope of the game being large and having lots of different systems and components. If you were to do it again, would you keep the scope the same, or would you change anything in your process or the game?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. The question is if I would change the scope of potions if I were to make it again. I think I would just not make potions first. I like the game as it is, honestly. And I had cut a number of systems. I had like a shop system and like an order system and a day-night cycle system. So there were a lot of systems that were cut. I think it's well balanced as the type of game it is, and I think I should have made many smaller games first. Should have made like a simple platformer, or even like a couch PvP game, something else. In fact, the next game that I'm planning to work on is a party game that's all just mini games, because that sounds nice. Small, tight iteration, no complicated systems interacting with each other. So I'm just considering that a bunch of game jams I duct tape together and call a game. On the left here.
Curious, how many people did you have working for you during your game development, and how many people do you have now? And how did you manage the people during like almost 10 years while you were working on this?
Ooh, this could be a talk on its own. So the question is, how many people assisted me with the development of Potions of Curious Tale, and how many are assisting right now? I'm pretty much the only one who is working on the porting right now. My partner is the director of development at a co-development studio, so I absolutely harass him with questions, but I try to keep the code mostly on my own. Definitely like throw flags for help when I'm stuck. Throughout development, the team at its largest, I think, was around 8 people. I will note that everyone had other full-time jobs and were very part-time, and that was very difficult. So, you're considering team members who are contributing like 4 to 10 hours a month. So we had weekly meetings, and oftentimes people wouldn't be able to report on having anything done for weeks in a row. And it's just about being understanding. Because I was the lead developer, I wrote almost all the code, I've done most of the design. I could just keep trucking forward even without those assets being created. And that's what I worked towards a lot. Lots of temp assets, temp levels, using the same monster a bunch until I could give it a different skin. And so that allowed me to build a giant game while waiting for the rest of the assets to catch up. Did I answer your question fully?
Yeah, did you do all the programming, or did someone help you with that?
I would say I did 95% of programming. Like code-wise, I did about 95% of programming. I got some help with the controller window focus management, mostly because everything was on fire, and I got some help with localization. Yeah.
So you had the unique opportunity of like being part of the IGDA that creates a lot of the resources and documentation to help game developers, as well as being a game developer yourself, using all the resources and documentation, all the other things that the organizations would be able to provide. So now you have this perspective of both aspects. What are some of the things in terms of resources, documentation, or whatever you need to have with organizations to help more developers like yourself?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. The question is, with the perspective of both being at the IGDA and as a game developer, what sort of documentation is sort of missing to support me as a group? A lot of it is stuff that I've covered in here. It's understanding the business side of things, like how to get funding, what does funding mean? I didn't cover this in the talk. You do not need a publisher. Publishers are great, publishers are money. If you can self-fund, I think that they gives you a lot of advantages in some ways. It's not perfect for everyone, but I self-funded and I'm really glad I went that route. I think that, again, marketing is one. There are resources out there, but it still requires reading a lot of like individual articles instead of having everything come together. I think that good management, like good soft skills, empowering people is really difficult. And so some of the white papers I wrote are on that. Cultivating a positive work culture is one of the white papers I wrote, and it is focused around how to do that at a company of any size. Because I learned some of that by being bad at it, and that sucks because you're not helping your team members feel as empowered and supported as they should be. And then I do think there needs to be more support when it comes to just like overall planning and architecture, because a lot of times you make those mistakes and they are like huge tech debt that you figure out later, which can be really difficult and can kill projects if you're not prepared to make those pivots. Yes.
What's the most unexpected thing that people did with the game once it got in the wild?
What is the most unexpected thing?
Unexpected, like how they use the game.
Oh, what was the most unexpected thing with the game once people on the wild? Someone played my demo for 10 hours.
Oh.
I mean, did you? Yeah, I mean, like someone I don't know who was not like a close friend played the game for 10 hours in the demo. I didn't realize how much people would like just exploring and getting ingredients and experimenting with them to try to come up with all 114 potion recipes. Like I knew people would do that, and I knew they would do that for like the Steam achievements, but I didn't realize that there would just be people who'd be like, "This demo is great. You just play it for a day." I think the most unexpected thing that happened before the game's release was when I was demoing at Geek Girl Con. A set of parents came up to me and they said, "Our daughter is in 2nd grade and she gets bullied for liking Minecraft. Thank you so much for being here, because having a game that's for her and seeing that a girl is making it means the world to her." And I can't say that without tearing up every time. I have heard a lot of people reach out to me about how their daughters, their kids, their wives, and just their partners have really felt like this game is for them. And like, I made this game for me, honestly. Like I wasn't focused on like my market audience. And that's something I didn't expect. I didn't expect to like feel to other people to feel this connection with this silly little idea of mine. Yeah. Okay.
What made you decide on 2-dimensional art for the game, and did you run into any obstacles or limitations with that chosen?
Yeah, the question was, why did I go with 2D art, and was there any obstacles? Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to make something 2D that feels good. Like being able to walk behind bushes is something that took me like 3 years to figure out a good solution for. I was very early in development, it wasn't high priority. It wasn't like I spent 3 years just on that, but I reworked sort of the entire layering system to make it feel like a more actual world where you're not just like unable to walk behind bushes because they're hard in a weird way. The reason I decided 2D is because it was way easier to prototype and way easier to get assets for. And then I think probably the most useful tool that I used or became part of our tool chain for that is we actually used Spine from Esoteric Software. So we don't have very many frame-by-frame animations. They're almost all mesh rigged with bones. So you actually can use like 3D like animation principles for these. It allows you to develop very quickly those animations without having to draw as much art. So that was a lifesaver. All right, we're gonna take one more.
Could you talk a little bit more about how your game mechanics evolved, or did you have it like completely figured out at the beginning?
Yeah, the question was, can I talk more about how the game mechanics evolved? So, at the core, I knew that I wanted a game that discouraged senseless slaughter by having your aggressive actions be resource consuming. That was sort of where I started from. From there, it evolved in multiple directions. I think the two main complexities it evolved were on one side, I decided to go into sort of like elemental interactions. And I think that actually could have been fleshed out more. So you can like cast a vine attack and then cast a fire attack, and it sets those vines on fire. You can extinguish fire with water, and it creates steam, and those have additional like effects. And I think I got really heavily into types of like effects and debuffs, and those ended up feeling really good because it helped the spells feel more diverse. Like straight fire damage versus straight water damage versus straight earth damage doesn't feel very different. But if the earth has a knock up and slow, and the ice has a stun, and the fire has a dot, that helps the game feel like 114 potions actually do different things, which absolutely was a challenge. The other side that sort of evolved is I realized that making all aggressive actions take resources was also sort of creating some weird gameplay interactions, and that since some rare ingredients you can only get from certain engagements, like freezing a creature or hitting it with like a knockback effect, um, setting those up to happen in the world felt great for the player because they felt really smart. So I put turrets all over the world, and like, yeah, they can attack the player, but you can use them to do other things. And I actually have one turret set up where there's like a treasure chest next to a bean that if you hit with water turns into a ladder, and a water turret. So if you go get the treasure chest, you're more likely than not to get the water turret to attack the bean. So if you haven't figured out that beans grow into ladders, it just magically happens, and then the players are like, I'm so smart. And you're like, yes, you are. Kudos. And so like a lot of those interactions, I felt like I needed to script. And again, that came with play testing, understanding what players didn't first understand, and then setting ways for those to happen.
How often did you play test?
How often did I play test? As often as I could. I took advantage of pretty much any opportunity to go to a local conference that didn't cost money. So if there, Seattle Indies is really great at finding local conference opportunities where you can demo your game for free. So I definitely took advantage of those opportunities. And then as soon as I released my demo, I was basically addicted to watching Twitch streams of my game. Like, that was a really great way to get live feedback as well. I would say in general, you should be looking at trying to play test, depending on your development cycle, like every major like feature or certainly like 3 times milestone. Like I'll say that, and that is means nothing because you can have all sorts of milestones, but it's really hard to break down. Since I was developing part-time on my game, I would say every 3 to 6 months, but I was working part-time, so it's probably gonna be a more rapid pace if you're working full-time on a title. All right. I'm gonna still be around. I just want to let you all socialize with each other. So please feel free to come up and ask more questions. And I'm giving the mic to Tim.
Thank you so much, Renee. That was amazing. Thanks everybody for coming out, asking so many great questions. Enjoy that, and hope you enjoyed the talk. We're going to try to do more of these once every other month or so as we're able to schedule them. So if you like this one, keep an eye on our meetup, and we'll hopefully have another one soon. If you got inspired by Renee's talk and you want to start working on your game or start working on it again or find new people to work with, you can join us tomorrow over at AIE, which is right here on the Seattle Center campus in the 4th floor of the Armory. You can talk to Coleman or William, who's here. Rob works at AIE as a teacher. He can tell you more about the school, but we meet there every Saturday from 1 to 7 about, and a bunch of people hang out and work on their games together. And they can get you started on tutorials if you've never even tried making a game, and help you with that. So it's a great resource. Take advantage of it if you feel like you want to. This Sunday, we have Seattle Indies Expo online. We'll be showing all 32, most of the games that we showed at 6 in person. If you were there and you didn't get to see all the games, now's your chance. If you just want to spend some more time watching the games again and meeting the developers behind those games, you'll get that chance. It'll be a full day stream of interviews and gameplay, and it'll be a lot of fun. And yeah, we have a lot of other great upcoming events coming on our calendar, so just go take a look at those. We have monthly socials happening all over the city and county now. We have them in Linwood, in Burien and Kent, over in Redmond, here in Seattle, and up in like the Ravenna neighborhood. So there's plenty of places to go out and meet people in your neighborhood or come to one that's close to you. We'll be having a game jam coming up in October that you can find out more about on our meetup page. Game Jam Plus we're participating in for the first time. It's a worldwide event that starts off with a 48-hour game jam and then goes into a whole accelerator incubator program that is run by a team in Brazil, and it's a pretty cool event that we're taking part in for the first time. So yeah, we have the space until about 9 o'clock. There's still pizza left. James said he would take people. Oh, he's on his way back. If you're interested in taking a tour of the facility, please do that as well. They have co-working space that you can rent desks for super cheap to come work with other creatives. There's musicians, people making films. There's all kinds of really cool people doing really cool things in here. So it's a great place to be. So thanks again, everybody, and yeah, have a great evening.
Nice presentation.
Oh, thank you.
So yeah, too many sounds like something you want to say.
I know. It is, but it's such a useful group.